investigations from the case files of Lieutenant Joe Kenda. First, a runaway truck leaves a trail of destruction.
He doesn't do anything to stop. He runs into the building.
Did this person have a heart attack?
His family insisted this was an accident.
When we find out the identity of the victim, it brings out a lot more questions.
Then, a dive bar murder appears open and shut.
Officer, that guy, that's the one who shot him.
Spread your arms.
But getting to the truth proves to be an elusive undertaking.
We have additional suspects. We don't know if they're in cahoots with our first party.
Is there more to this story? Of course there is. There's a ton more. As I've often told people, you want to avoid being the victim of a violent crime? Stay out of bars late at night. Nothing good happens after midnight.
It was a typical afternoon at Peterson Air Force Base.
Looking pretty good there.
Always go to you.
Hey, Carl.
Hey,
Travis.
Floyd.
How are you?
How you doing?
As usual, Floyd Burnett is early for his haircut.
Looking a little shaggy there.
Well, that's what happens when you retire. You know, you kind of let things go.
Yeah.
They say once a military man, always a military man, and part of that is keeping your hair cut high and tight.
He sees a vehicle driving through the parking lot, and it's going way too fast.
What's this idiot doing?
That fight or flight response starts to take over.
Hit the deck!
On the west side of town, Lieutenant Joe Kenda is driving back to the station when he gets an unusual call.
Dispatch for Lieutenant Kenda.
Go for Kenda.
We have a report of an auto pedestrian accident, possible fatality.
The crash occurred in the parking lot of the commissary at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs.
What do they need me there for?
Homicide would rarely respond to the scene of a traffic accident, but there is some question here whether this was accidental or intentional.
Air Force security forces are on scene and will be expecting you.
10-4, Kenda out.
Peterson Air Force Base is unique. They are on the 7,000 acres that comprise the municipal airport owned and operated by the state of Colorado Springs. The CSPD has jurisdiction on this property.
Hello, Sergeant. I'm Lieutenant Kenda from CSPD. My team and I will take it from here.
Saw yours, Lieutenant. I'll tell you what we've got so far.
You don't see that every day.
No, sir. Witnesses said that the truck came through the parking lot at a high rate of speed.
When the truck impacted the building, it created a lot of debris. The debris caused minor lacerations on some of the customers in the barbershop.
What about the potential fatality?
It was an unidentified elderly female. Body was over there.
He explains the truck hit a pedestrian just before it impacted the building, and the pedestrian's condition was considered to be grave and had been removed by ambulance.
What about the driver?
He's pretty roughed up. Looked like he had a broken neck. He was also transported.
The driver of this truck is identified as a 70-year-old man whose name is William Gibbs. He's a retired sergeant, United States Air Force.
Plus, if we can do anything to help you.
Will do. Thanks, sir.
Kenda begins by surveying the damage.
It's remarkable that no one else died in the process of this truck driving through a barber shop at 100 miles an hour.
When we see these accidents that involve elderly drivers, we do question whether or not their mental and physical condition plays an actual part into the cause of the accident.
Did this person have a heart attack, or were they on medication?
None of these questions can be answered until investigators can speak with the driver.
Kenda to Ritz.
Go for Ritz.
I need you to go to the hospital, check on William Gibbs, find out what his condition is, and keep me updated on what you find. Sit down there. Here we go.
This is our point of impact. It's in the parking lot. Quite a distance from the front door.
You hit it right there. Got caught up underneath the truck and ended up over there.
This could also be a hit-and-run accident. Somebody doesn't see the pedestrian they hit, and in panic, they're running as fast as this truck will go, and they wind up sticking in a building.
Just then, Detective Ritz reports back to Kenda with an update.
Ritz informs me that they've identified the victim as Teresa Gibbs.
Yeah, victim is a 66-year-old female. She's the wife of the driver of the truck.
He ran over his own wife. Did she make any statements to anyone?
No, unfortunately, the surgeons just told me that she passed away in surgery.
It broke my heart when this happened.
Well, it was sad. We were wondering how that could happen.
So the hit-and-run idea is out the window. These people are married to each other.
It brings out a lot more questions. Is it purely an accident? Or is this I'm mad at my wife, I'm gonna run her over?
How about Mr. Gibbs?
He's banged up pretty bad. He's got a
broken clavicle, severe contusions of the neck and spine, and a bruised lung. Fortunately, though, he's gonna make it. We're gonna be able to talk to him after the doctors run a few more tests.
All right, I'll be there as soon as I can.
no.
Kenda instructs his team to transport the truck to the CSI garage for further processing. In the meantime, the traffic investigator arrives on the scene.
How you doing?
Lieutenant?
Their mission is to tell me what this vehicle was doing at various points in this process based on the abrasion and skid marks on the asphalt. It's a very involved process and it takes a couple of hours.
All right, I need to go to the hospital. I'll check back with you.
Yes, sir.
Hey.
Any news?
Yeah, we can talk to William Gibbs now. Doctors just let me know that his test results all came back negative, too.
There's no medical condition. There's no drugs or alcohol involved.
Mr. Gibbs, I'm incredibly sorry for your loss.
Can't believe this happened. Married for 41 years.
She was a homemaker when he served in the military.
They each had children from other marriages. And then they got together and they had children together.
They were basically just normal married people.
You know, my entire life, this is only the second accident I've ever had.
He says the first one was a fender bender and it happened decades ago.
So you're saying this is an accident?
Of course, damn throttle stuck.
So the gas pedal went all the way to the floor?
That's what I'm saying.
Why don't you tell us what happened today?
We went over to the commissary.
Honey, I don't think I can park this thing.
Just go. I'll park the damn thing.
Okay.
Williams explains that Teresa did not think she could park their truck in a confined parking space.
You know what? I'll meet you inside by produce.
Fine, fine.
All right.
He says after his wife got out of the vehicle, she started across in front of me.
William claims he placed his foot on the brake and put the vehicle in gear. But to his horror, the truck lurched forward. Running over his wife.
It just started up. Couldn't stop it till it hit the building.
Are you sure you weren't pressing down the throttle by mistake?
Yeah, sure to hell know the difference between the brake and gas pedal.
Well, obviously, one of our primary concerns is the status of the truck. Was it fully operational?
We're going to let you rest now. We'll check back in on you.
So we get a court-certified expert mechanic to examine the truck. But in the meantime, I need to find out what the circumstances are of their marriage. I need to find out if there's a reason why Gibbs wanted his wife dead. We're continuing our investigation into a major traffic accident where a person ran over his wife in the parking lot of the commissary at Peterson Air Force Base.
It could be a complete accident. It could be a homicide with the intent to run over. We don't know at this point.
Kenda hopes a conversation with the couple's son, Victor, will provide some answers.
Victor?
Yes.
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
That's fine.
He reports that his parents do have a tendency to argue. They are, in his words, the Bickersons.
That's just the way they communicate. I will tell you this. There's just no way my father would ever do anything to hurt my mother.
Can you think of anything that's happened recently that might have caused friction between the two of them?
Well, we have had family in town for the last few weeks, but they left this morning.
It was brought to the police's attention that William was a little upset. There wasn't any food in the house. And so he was like, we got to go grocery shopping.
Was this enough to make him angry on the way to the grocery store? So angry that he wound up murdering his wife with his truck? We'll have to see.
Hey, Lieutenant, we located this guy, John Mooney. He said he witnessed a couple arguing in the parking lot. So you're gonna want to talk to him.
How big of an argument?
He said it was so heated he stopped what he was doing to watch.
Let's get him in here now.
Yes, sir.
When you can stop people in their tracks, you are seriously engaged. And it says one thing to me, it says this is no accident.
Why don't you walk me through what you witnessed out there?
I just helped a customer with their bags, and I was walking back to the store. That's when I heard yelling.
And did you hear what they were yelling?
All you do is buy big vehicles. I don't know why you have to get this stupid... Yeah, but I got to get in that spot, and there's no way I can do this.
Park the damn thing.
I can't do it!
I will. Just
You know what?
down.
I'll tell you what. I'm just going to let you do this.
Go ahead.
When people lose control of their judgment is when emotions are piqued. We now have motive.
Wondering if the car holds more clues, Kenda contacts the mechanic at the CSPD garage.
Mr. Gibbs alleges there's a mechanical failure with this vehicle. I don't believe him. That doesn't mean it isn't true.
Hey, Drew.
Hey, LT.
Did you find anything?
I checked everything. Gas pedal connection, brake lines, everything seemed to be in perfect working order before the crash.
So it was impossible for the accelerator to be stuck?
I can't say 100%, but it's highly unlikely.
No, I appreciate it. Let me know if you find anything else.
Will do.
Kenda still needs concrete evidence that proves the wreck was no accident. Just then, he's summoned back to the scene by the traffic investigator.
Any conclusions?
Yes, sir. Come with me.
So this is no accident, it's intentional. Come here, I'll show you how I know that.
See the marks there? Those are acceleration marks.
Basically, these marks are left over from somebody sitting in a vehicle, slamming on the gas.
Sped up again. That's where these marks come from.
So we have three sets of motion. We have speed, contact, stop, acceleration again. So they've hit this person and they've run over them a second time. That's intent.
Brutal. I appreciate it. You want to send me the report when you're done?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
The acceleration marks, coupled with the statement from eyewitness John Mooney, allow Kenda to piece together what happened.
We believe that Teresa Gibbs drove William to the commissary parking lot. She was going to try to park the vehicle, but it was a very small parking space. She became a little nervous about it.
Just park the damn thing.
It's too small. I'm going to just drive out back.
I'm not going cross country just for a parking space.
Park it yourself. You know what? I hope you drop dead.
She gets out and starts to cross in front of the vehicle.
She doesn't think anything about it. She doesn't feel like she's in any danger.
But inside the cab of the truck, William Gibbs is fuming.
Mr. Gibbs has reached his limit. He is enraged. He hits the gas of the truck. And off he goes. She's literally scooped off the ground by the front end of this truck. The heel of her shoe got scraped off.
He then lets off the gas, slowing the vehicle, causing her to slide forward off the truck.
You can see by the impact bleeding on the asphalt. For a brief moment, she laid there and bled on this spot. He then re-accelerated and ran over her with the entire vehicle. What is he doing when he continues to accelerate? Who knows? He is an emotional wreck.
He He doesn't do anything to stop. He continues to accelerate until he runs into the building.
He probably didn't even think about the people in the barber shop. You have to be almost out of your mind.
This is a textbook example of the words of the statute of second-degree murder.
Armed with this theory, Kenda and Ritz take another go at William Gibbs.
William, I hate to break it to you, but there's nothing wrong with the throttle. So you want to tell me why you ran over your wife?
You're out of your mind.
He was adamant that it was an accident. He became very infuriated with us to a point where he decided he was tired, didn't want to talk to us anymore.
You know, maybe I should see a lawyer.
All right. We'll be back when the hospital says you can be released.
He was subsequently arrested for second-degree murder. His family was adamant throughout the entire investigation that this was nothing more than the accident, that he had no reason to kill his wife.
Well, I did ask him, and he said no, he didn't do it on purpose. I remember feeling kind of protective because he was old and he was injured.
The one thing we knew 100% is Teresa would have never wanted him charged or anything.
After consulting with Teresa's family, the DA drops the second-degree murder charge against the ailing William Gibbs. In exchange, William pleads no contest to criminally negligent homicide.
He received 3 years probation, and he had to pay restitution for the damage to the building at Peterson Air Force Base.
William Gibbs passed away in 2003. To this day, those who knew him and Teresa feel conflicted about the outcome of the case.
It's my father. It's my stepmother. I want to think it's an accident, and I hope it was. And I'll probably never know.
I guess if they were both still alive, they'd probably be just doing the same things that they always did. Growing tomatoes and camping and fishing and joking around.
It's a terrible thing when people who've been together for so long can't continue to be together. He had to spend his remaining years on this earth in the jail of his own mind, because in his heart of hearts, he knew what he did.
Coming up,
On the ground right now.
when a young man's life is brutally snuffed out, Kenda discovers he was playing with fire.
You never involve yourself in someone else's affair of the heart. It's dangerous.
It's Saturday night, and Lieutenant Joe Kenda is enjoying a rare night off with his wife, Kathy.
That was so great. I can't believe we got those seats right up front.
I know, right? They were awesome.
I grew up listening to rock and roll music. I like the Eagles. I like the Rolling Stones. It is a rare thing to have a major group show up in this area. So anytime they did, we tried to go.
My ears are still ringing.
What was that?
Anytime you go to a rock concert, you're about half deaf when you come out of the place. But it didn't matter. We just really liked it.
Oh, hold on.
Are you kidding me?
It was absolutely devastating sometimes to Kathy because her life was not her own.
Kath, I'm sorry. It's my job.
Yeah, I know. I just hate worrying about you so much. It's okay. We had fun tonight, though, didn't we?
We did.
Kenda suits up and pulls into a bar parking lot on the east side of town. It's already swarming with police and intoxicated patrons.
Hey, Dave. So what we got tonight?
We got one victim, James Holmes, 25-year-old white male, a single gunshot to the chest, was pronounced DOA in St. Francis.
Officer Morgan is one of the first officers on the scene. He tells me that this is very cut and dried.
Was he shot inside the bar?
Yes, sir. And we actually have several witnesses The only problem is we're in the process of collecting statements now. They're all so drunk that they can't give us a clear picture of what happened.
Anytime you have an investigation where witnesses have been drinking, you're always concerned about their level of intoxication and their ability to relate what they saw.
Any lead on the suspect?
Actually, it's your lucky night. Got the guy in custody back in the car right there.
Good job.
The suspect is identified as 24-year-old Joseph Brown.
You want to walk me through what happened?
Yes, sir. I got here within minutes of the call. Dispatcher gave me a description of the suspect through a 911 caller. I get here, several witnesses run out, and they tell me somebody had been shot on the inside.
He is told that the suspect is described as a white male, long brown hair, in a red plaid shirt and blue jeans.
I need everybody to back up. Out of the way over here. Everybody get back. Back up right now. Let me see your hands. Sir, get away.
He sees a man matching that description, bent over what is apparently the victim, pleading with the victim to stay alive.
Sir, come here. Come here, sir. On the ground right now. I got one male suspect matching the description, one male victim. I do not see a gun. Get out now.
Officer, that guy, that's the one who shot him.
Spread your arms. Spread them down. Hey, cuff him for me. Hands behind your back. Arms up.
Why are you arresting me? Jim! Jim, look at me! What'd I do?
The officer takes control of this individual and handcuffs him.
That time I took him in custody and brought him outside. The strange thing is I think he was in shock because he seemed awfully remorseful.
Maybe I had to change your heart after you pulled the trigger.
It could be the simple fact as it was an accident, or maybe he just realized he just ruined his own life.
Who ID'd him as a suspect?
It was actually the bartender. She's also one that called 911, and we had CSI come down and take pictures of our suspect. She's en route to the station now to ID him in a photo lineup.
All right, great. You want to show me inside?
Yes, sir. Over here, this is where I found the victim.
There's no tables disturbed, no broken beer bottles, none of the things you often find in bar fights that escalate from fists to glassware to gunfire.
Where I found a .380 casing.
What about the weapon?
Don't know, we haven't found it. It wasn't on the suspect when we arrested him.
Really? Okay, you probably handed it off to a buddy right after he shot the guy. Keep searching the place. Might still be stashed in here somewhere.
Yes, sir.
Outside the bar, a conversation between bystanders catches Kenda's attention.
They had to be involved. I know they did it.
And this woman says she saw 3 people run out of the bar. Running people from crime scenes always interests me.
Excuse me, you mind if I ask you a few questions about what you saw tonight?
Yeah, sure.
Her name is Victoria Gonzalez.
It was so awful and it happened so fast.
Okay, just slow down.
So I was standing at one end of the bar.
Hey, Victoria, what can I get you? Beer and a shot, coming right up.
Victoria explains she heard a few bar patrons raising their voices.
Hey, you. Thanks.
Big shot. You better watch your mouth, man.
It's getting more crazy there, is it?
It was a verbal argument that escalated, followed by a shooting. Victoria says that the shooter in the red plaid shirt left the bar with a female with long blonde hair and another guy who was wearing a black cowboy hat.
I didn't get that good of a look at him.
Did you see someone with a gun?
I think the guy in the red shirt had a gun in his hand.
She believes that the party that she saw leaving in the red plaid shirt subsequently came back into the bar, and she identified that individual, the one we have detained, as being our suspect.
When the guy with the red shirt came back in, did you see him with a gun?
No, I don't think so.
What about the other 2? Did they come back in as well?
I didn't see them again, no.
So Victoria Gonzalez is right, and the guy in the red plaid shirt is the shooter, and he fled the bar with 2 other people. Did he pass the gun off to one of his friends, and then came back in to plead for the victim's life.
Hey, Lou.
Hey, what's up?
I need you to call in a bolo for 2 possible accomplices, a female with long blonde hair and a male with a black cowboy hat.
Got it.
This is Davis Dispatch.
With a bolo issued for the two potential accomplices, Kenda turns to the suspect in custody, Joseph Brown.
Let's see what he has to say for himself. Want to pull him out?
This is a mistake. You got the wrong guy. Jim's my friend. Why would I shoot Jim?
I can smell alcohol on him. He's 24 years old, but he looks like maybe he is 10.
Joseph, we had two people that ID'd you as the shooter. Why don't you tell me what happened?
So Joseph tells me he's in the bar. He's drinking with the victim, Jim Holmes.
Yeah, me too.
Not this guy.
The guy in the black cowboy hat comes in, and Jim Holmes immediately says something nasty to him. It was something about a girl, somebody treating a girl badly. That's all he could remember.
Hey, you. Mr. Big Shot. One who likes to push women around.
Man, mind your own business.
Then what happened?
The guy in the black cowboy hat comes over with his friends and everybody starts yelling and the gun goes off.
Now he's trying to blame it on the guy in the black hat.
Do you see a gun on me?
Joseph is currently under arrest. Is he therefore a credible person? No, he's not. What if Brown here wants to lay this off on the guy in the black cowboy hat when it's actually him all along?
Joseph, I'm gonna have you taken down to the station where you can sober up for a little bit. Then I'll have a few more questions for you.
Oh, man.
Get him out of here, man.
I didn't do it.
Watch it.
Kenda may have a suspect in custody, but something just doesn't feel right.
This is a bar shooting. Is anybody telling me the truth? Absolutely not. We need to find a black cowboy hat dude and his long-haired girlfriend. That we need to do. The police find Jim Holmes dead from a gunshot wound, and they make an arrest in a bar of Joseph Brown. He says he's innocent of this crime. Now we have to get to the bottom of this.
Hey, Lou, you got any leads on those accomplices?
Nothing's turned up yet. It helped if we had some names.
At this point, it's very vital for us to identify the man in the cowboy hat and the blonde that was observed running away with our suspect.
While Kenda waits for his prime suspect to sober up, he turns his attention to the victim.
Do you have the contact info for Jim's family?
Just an address we got from his driver's license.
I guess I'll start there. Thanks.
There is no preparation to giving a death notification. You have no idea what's going to happen after you make that statement.
Who's there?
Lieutenant Kenda with the Colorado Springs Police Department. Can you open the door, please?
What's going on?
Does James Holmes live here?
Not anymore. That's my ex-boyfriend.
You mind if I come in and talk to you for a minute?
This woman's name is Danielle Roberts. I find out she's the recently former girlfriend of James Holmes.
So, what's going on with Jim?
I'm afraid I have some bad news. Jim was shot and killed earlier tonight.
They had recently broken up, but that's just got to rip your heart out, regardless of how you feel about that person.
She described him as a nice fellow. Nice man, he liked to work on cars. His dream was to someday own a body shop.
I met Jim through my father's 4x4 shop. It was easy to be a friend with. Just a big brother to a lot of people and a good friend to most.
Can you think of anything that might have led up to this, or anyone he didn't get along with?
Well, sometimes Jim would stick his nose where it didn't belong.
I wouldn't classify him as being aggressive, but he couldn't stand the fact of a man beating on a woman or anything like that.
You know, right before we broke up, he told me about something that happened.
And what was that?
And she recalls that he told her he had gotten into a verbal argument with a guy.
I mean, if you wanted to be a little tramp, you can just get on out of here.
Hey, why don't you ease up on her a bit, pal?
Man, this don't concern you.
Listen, you want to pick on somebody, you pick on me, all right?
Jim said they didn't tussle or anything, just argued, and then that couple left.
Did he mention the names of the people he argued with?
He didn't say.
Could the innocent Danielle is describing be connected to Jim's murder? My gut tells me these two events are connected. So I go back to the station to see how the photo lineup was going with our 911 caller.
You wanted to see me, sir?
Yeah, did the bartender pick out Mr. Red Plaid Shear?
They show her a photo lineup that contains a photograph of Joseph and 5 other people, and she says the shooter is not among the 6 photographs.
You're kidding.
She swears it's none of the guys.
You want to send her in?
Yeah.
So our identification of Joseph Brown has just gone out the window. I'm not ready to turn him loose yet, but I'm highly questioning why we have him in the first place.
Have a seat.
Melissa Wagner's a bartender. She watches people all the time.
Well, I was working the bar and I heard these guys raising their voices.
She sees 2 groups of people with a verbal exchange of profanity going back and forth.
And one of these guys is wearing a red plaid shirt?
Actually, there were 2 guys in red plaid shirts.
Wait, what?
Yeah, 2 guys in red plaid. One of them was this little guy who was with the guy who got shot. He was very short. I remember carting him earlier because he looked like he was underage.
Then she says the shooter is the other guy in the red plaid flannel shirt, and he's 6 feet tall. And he's with the guy in the black cowboy hat and the girl with long blonde hair.
And you're positive the tall guy had the gun?
100% positive.
We know that Joseph was 5'4", not a very tall guy. So we're assuming that the taller one is now our suspect.
So why'd you pick out the short guy at the crime scene?
It was so chaotic. I didn't realize I made the mistake until I got down here for the photo lineup. I feel awful. I'm so sorry.
Now, listen, it's okay. You've been through a traumatic event. We appreciate you being honest and helping us sort through this. The detective will see you out. Thank you.
With Melissa's statement in tow, Kenda radios his team that the shooter is still at large.
10-4, Kenda out.
We tell the officer searching the area. We're also now looking for a white male, 6 feet tall, red plaid flannel shirt.
As for the initial suspect, Joseph Brown, Kenda decides to hold him a little longer.
I still need to be certain that he did not play a part in this, so we're going to keep him on ice until we sort all this out.
Within the hour, Kenda receives some welcome news.
You're not going to believe this. We just arrested a guy matching the update description you just put out. He was inside the shanty bar.
Hiding in plain sight?
He has a red flannel shirt, not on, but tied around his waist.
Turn around, sir. Hands on the car. Turn around. Where's your feet? What's this?
And he's carrying a holster for a small automatic up to his pants. No gun in it. Well, we're getting better at this. Much better. They identify him as Rodney Gere.
Hands behind your back.
They're handcuffing him, and a female with long blonde hair runs up
You need to move.
I'm not moving.
and says, "What are you doing with my boyfriend? Who are you?"
What's your name? What is your name?
Evelyn Blankenship. You
Okay, we're looking for you too.
There's no freaking way.
Yes,
I'm
you
not going
are.
anywhere. I'm going to go home is where I'm going to go. And so is my boyfriend.
So here we are in this case, going from confusion and misidentification of suspects to 2 of the 3 suspects in our hands.
That's what they all say. Come on, let's get on in.
And it's time for us to collect their tab. We finally arrive at 2 of the 3 best suspects. One of them is Evelyn Blankenship, the other is Rodney Gere. We still don't have a gun, and we still don't know who Black Cowboy Hat is. But we certainly know a hell of a lot more than we did about what happened here.
Put your hands in front of you.
Looking at Mr. Gere, he's obviously a lot taller than Joseph Brown, but other than that, they look quite similar. So you can certainly understand why witnesses would mistake one for the other.
Have a seat.
Man, I can already tell you right now, you're wasting your time.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about what happened at the shanty bar.
I don't know nothing about that. I don't care what you want.
We could see why that kind of person could easily get involved in an altercation inside of a bar.
Well, if you wanted to avoid a big piece of prison time, it'd be in your best interest to cooperate with us.
You know what I want? A lawyer.
It's your choice.
He is in major trouble, and he knows it. So his only defense is silence. I don't know why he's the shooter yet, but he is.
After Rodney Gere lawyers up, Kenda takes his chances with Evelyn Blankenship.
Hi, Evelyn. I'm Lieutenant Kenda.
Well, it's about damn time. Where's Rodney? Where's my boyfriend?
Evelyn is a belligerent, nasty, mouthy little drunk. She didn't get that way in 20 minutes. She's been drinking all evening.
Evelyn, we know you were at the shanty bar with Rodney and another guy with a black cowboy hat. We have witnesses that saw you there.
Yeah, we were out having a good time. I mean, is that some crime now, too?
These witnesses also saw you have a verbal altercation with another guy moments before he was shot to death.
What? Jesus. Who do you guys think we are? We had nothing to do with anybody getting shot.
She's saying when the gunshot went off, all they did was flee the bar for their own safety.
Okay, so you left because you were frightened. Where'd you go?
She says, well, I went to my friend's house, Lonnie Fouché. He lives right there by the bar.
So why'd you come back to the crime scene?
Well, I lost track of Rodney. I was worried, so I went back to the bar to see if I could find him.
What about the guy in the black cowboy hat?
Yeah, well, that's Rodney's friend.
His name is Chuck Sizemore. Okay, so now we have the name of the third player.
And where would I find him?
I have no clue. Probably out getting drunk somewhere.
Why would a guy like Sizemore go to a bar after a shooting? To drown his fear. That's why.
Kenda instructs his men to canvass the other bars near where the shooting took place. It doesn't take them long to find their man.
We immediately turned Charles Sizemore wearing a black cowboy hat in a bar close to the scene. What a surprise. When I arrived, the officers have him outside the bar.
I feel like this is all my fault.
Why is that?
Well, the guy that died, we got into an argument a couple weeks ago, and this is how this all got started.
He tells us that he's in an argument with his girlfriend. Not a physical argument, but his girlfriend becomes emotional and starts crying.
Do you even care about my feelings?
Why do you have to be so cruel? I didn't even ask him for a drink.
Did you have to take it?
Hey, listen, you want to pick on somebody, you pick on me.
This ain't none of your business.
And Holmes came out of nowhere accusing him of abusing this woman.
Kenda realizes it's the same story that Jim's ex-girlfriend told him.
So what happened this time?
Well, me and Rodney and Evelyn were going to the Shanty bar, and that same guy was yelling at me and stuff.
Okay, what can I get for you guys? All right, beer and a shot. Coming right up.
Hey. Hey, you.
Here you go.
Hey, Big Shot. Likes to talk nasty to women?
Man, mind your own business, man.
Better watch him, lady. He'll hit you, too.
Hey, asshole. Why don't you go say it to his face, or do you need to grow a pair?
She was making the whole thing worse. I didn't want any trouble, so I told Ronnie, we need to go ahead and squash this.
So Sizemore explains that Evelyn is stoking this fire with a gallon of gasoline.
Who do you think you are? You're such a piece of...
Look, you and your friends need to leave.
Chuck Sizemore tells Kenda that at this point, Rodney Gere becomes enraged that a stranger is talking down to his girlfriend.
You and your drunk friends need to get out. Hey, what are you doing?
You better watch him now.
Get down.
Gere grabs Joseph by the throat and literally lifts him off the floor and slams him onto the bar. He pulls the gun. He points the gun at Joseph Brown, but Evelyn Blankenship grabs his arm just as he fires the weapon. He intends to shoot Joseph Brown, but he winds up shooting Mr. Holmes instead, killing him.
It was awful. I didn't even know Ronnie had a gun.
So y'all ran out? What happened to the gun?
Well, I heard Evelyn say something about they were going to some guy's house, Lonnie, I think it was. I don't know, I came here, I don't know what they did.
Mr. Sizemore has cleared all the fog out of this bar. It's also completely clear on who's responsible. The only question that remains is, where is the gun?
As the sun rises over Colorado Springs, detectives obtain an address for Lonnie Fouché.
Lonnie, open the door!
Your hands. Listen, I don't want any trouble. Evelyn was here earlier and she just wanted me to hide a gun.
He didn't do it. He left it on the table right for us to see. He's very open, very believable.
With the alleged murder weapon located, and with a pair of corroborating statements, Kenda releases both Joseph Brown and Chuck Sizemore.
We have enough to formally file charges against Rodney for this murder and to charge Evelyn with accessory to murder.
Rodney Gear pleads guilty to manslaughter and receives 16 years. Evelyn Blankenship is convicted of tampering with physical evidence. She is sentenced to 4 weekends in jail and 2 years probation.
It's been 23 years since this happened. It still hurts. I feel sorry for all the other people that knew him. He was just a good person. And there was no reason for this to have happened.
Protecting the innocent is what the police do. It turns out Mr. Holmes believed he was protecting someone, but at the end of the day, he needed someone to protect him.
The phone kept ringing in the apartment across the hall, long after midnight, long after the city had settled into its uneasy half-sleep, the kind where sirens fade but never fully disappear, where New York in 1987 breathes in short, nervous bursts. The answering machine clicked on after the 5th ring, swallowed the silence, and recorded nothing but the hollow echo of a room that should not have been empty. By morning, that unanswered call would become the first detail no one could ever explain. The first crack in a case that would refuse to die, refuse to rest, refuse to give back the truth it took. She was 23 years old, young enough to believe the city was still full of promises, old enough to know it could turn on you without warning. She had moved to Manhattan less than a year earlier, chasing something vague and hopeful, work in publishing maybe, or just the thrill of being anonymous among millions. Her name appeared in a short classified ad once, offering tutoring services. It appeared again on a lease written in careful handwriting, and then abruptly it stopped appearing anywhere at all. On the night she vanished, the temperature dipped lower than expected. A late autumn cold front slid through the city, sharp and sudden. Witnesses would later remember coats pulled tighter, breath hanging in the air, the smell of damp concrete rising from the streets. She left her office near Union Square just after 8 p.m., according to a security guard who barely looked up from his newspaper. She smiled, he said. Or maybe she didn't. He wasn't sure. Nobody ever is when it starts like this. Her subway ride should have taken 12 minutes. The turnstile recorded her MetroCard swipe at 8:17 p.m. That timestamp would become sacred to investigators, repeated in reports, underlined in red, circled again and again as if pressure alone could make it speak. After that, the trail thinned to almost nothing. No confirmed sightings. No security footage worth trusting. No phone calls made from her apartment line after 9 p.m. Just a quiet building, a light left on in the kitchen, and a bag of groceries still sweating on the counter when her roommate came home close to midnight. The roommate called her name. Once. Twice. Then she noticed the door was unlocked. By dawn, the word missing had already begun to mutate into something heavier. Flyers went up on lampposts and deli windows, stapled hastily, the ink still smelling fresh. Her face stared out at strangers, brown eyes, uncertain smile, the kind of photo taken without knowing it would become evidence. Neighbors talked. Co-workers speculated. The police took notes. And somewhere between the initial report and the first press mention, the case began its slow slide toward something colder. New York in the late 1980s was not gentle with its mysteries. The city was loud with crime, crowded with tragedy. Homicide numbers climbed. Missing persons cases stacked up like paperwork no one had time to grieve over. Detectives worked fast or not at all. If there was blood, if there was a body, the machine moved. If there wasn't, cases drifted. This one drifted early. They searched her apartment top to bottom. No signs of a struggle. No overturned furniture. Her passport sat untouched in a drawer. Her wallet was missing, but so were her keys, which meant nothing and everything at the same time. The window faced the street 3 floors up. It was locked. The fire escape showed no disturbance. Whatever happened to her did not announce itself. Friends told police she had mentioned feeling watched in the weeks before she disappeared. Not followed exactly. Just a sense. A feeling on the back of the neck. One friend remembered her laughing it off, calling herself paranoid. Blaming too many crime stories, too many late nights. The detectives wrote it down anyway, filed it under unsubstantiated, and moved on. There was a man, of course. There is always a man. An ex-boyfriend from back home ruled out within days. A coworker who had asked her out once, then twice, then stopped calling. A neighbor who lived 2 floors below and worked nights, whose alibi was thin but unprovable. Each lead flared briefly, then went dark. No arrests. No charges. Just questions that stacked higher as the days stretched into weeks. The media circled for a moment, then lost interest. A short article ran in the Metro section. Another mentioned her name in a list of missing women, sandwiched between unrelated crimes. The headline did not say cold case yet. That would come later, after the heat bled out, after the phones stopped ringing, after Hope learned how to sit very still. Her family arrived from out of state with suitcases in disbelief. They walked the same streets she had walked, stood in the same subway stations, stared at the same graffiti-streaked walls, trying to imagine how a life could simply slip between the cracks. They spoke to detectives who avoided eye contact. They waited by the phone in borrowed apartments. They learned the rhythm of the city's indifference the hard way. Weeks passed. Then months. The case file thickened, then stopped growing. Leads dried up. Witness memories blurred. The MetroCard system purged old data. The city moved on. Somewhere along the line, someone wrote the words "inactive investigation" across the folder. It was not a declaration. It was a surrender. Years later, a junior detective would pull that file from a dusty shelf and feel the weight of it. The silence pressed between its pages. A young woman. A night that ended too early. A timeline with holes you could fall through. By then the term cold case fit too well. The edges were numb. The details brittle. Everyone involved had aged, transferred, retired, or died. But cold does not mean dead. It means preserved. It means waiting. In the neighborhoods around her old apartment, people still told stories. About screams heard once and never again. About a woman who looked like her seen boarding a bus out of state. About a body rumored to be buried beneath concrete poured during a late-night construction job. None of it solid. All of it haunting. The kind of whispers that live on because there is nothing stronger to replace them. Every anniversary brought a brief flicker of attention. A new detective quoted in the paper, promising fresh eyes. A press conference with the same photograph held up, edges worn soft by time. And always the same ending. No new information. No closure. No answers. The unanswered phone call remained the strangest detail of all. Investigators could never trace it. The phone company records were incomplete. The answering machine tape had been reused. Whatever voice might have been on the other end was gone forever. Just another absence layered onto an already impossible void. And yet, even as the years piled on, the case refused to disappear completely. It lingered in precinct hallways, in training sessions, in the minds of detectives who hated unsolved files. It lingered in her family's quiet rituals, the chair left empty at holidays, the hope that twisted into something painful but necessary. It lingered in the city itself, embedded in the memory of a place that had swallowed too many stories whole. By the time anyone dared to whisper the word solved, it would sound almost obscene. Too late. Too heavy. Too final for something that had lived so long without an ending. But in 1987, standing at the very edge of the mystery, none of that was visible yet. There was only a missing woman, a city that did not slow down for grief, and a question hanging in the cold air, unanswered. waiting to become something much darker. The first real search began 3 days after she vanished, when patients finally gave way to fear and the word missing stopped feeling temporary. Detectives walked her route again, step by step, as if retracing her path could rewind time. They stood at the subway entrance where her Metro card had last been logged, watching commuters stream past in a blur of coats and briefcases, each face anonymous, each one capable of having seen something and forgotten it just as quickly. The city was too busy to remember a single woman slipping through its veins. They knocked on doors along her block, the hollow thud of police knuckles echoing down narrow hallways that smelled of stale coffee and old paint. Some neighbors claimed they heard nothing that night. Others said they thought they heard raised voices, maybe an argument, maybe laughter. One woman swore she heard a scream around 9 p.m., sharp and sudden, then silence. When detectives asked why she hadn't called it in, she shrugged and said this was New York. Screams weren't unusual. That answer went into the report, filed neatly under unreliable. The building superintendent offered access to the basement, a low-ceiling space threaded with pipes and shadows. Flashlights swept across concrete floors, storage cages, abandoned furniture. Nothing. No blood. No torn clothing. Just dust and the distant hum of traffic above their heads. Another dead end, another place crossed off the list. Her co-workers were interviewed next, one by one, in sterile conference rooms that still smelled faintly of toner and stale donuts. They described her as quiet but friendly, ambitious, careful. Someone mentioned she had stayed late the week before, working on a project that never made it past the planning stage. Someone else remembered seeing her talking to a man outside the building one evening, maybe a week earlier. Tall, dark coat, face turned away. No name. No reason to remember him. That description would haunt the file for years. A faceless silhouette standing just out of focus. The detectives checked hospitals, shelters, morgues. They checked jails. They checked bus terminals and train stations, looking for a name that never appeared on any list. Her bank account showed no activity after the night she disappeared. No withdrawals. No purchases. Just a flat line where her life had stopped leaving a paper trail. There was a moment, brief and cruel, when hope spiked. A woman matching her description had been picked up by police in New Jersey, disoriented, claiming not to know her own name. The family rushed there, hearts pounding, only to find a stranger with similar eyes and nothing else in common. Another false start. Another quiet drive back across the river. As the days stretched on, detectives began to argue about theory instead of evidence. Voluntary disappearance versus foul play. Runaway versus abduction. One detective leaned toward the idea that she had left on her own, overwhelmed by the city, cutting ties clean. Another pushed back hard. People don't vanish without money, without documents, without telling someone. People don't leave groceries on the counter and lights on in the kitchen. That debate never resolved. It simply hardened into opposing notes in the case file. Her family felt the shift immediately. Phone calls from the precinct became less frequent. Updates turned vague. Phrases like "no significant developments" and "still following up on leads" replaced specifics. The energy that had driven the early search drained away, replaced by routine. The case was slipping, cooling, becoming one more unsolved question in a city full of them. Then came the anonymous tip. It arrived late one evening, a call to the precinct desk, voice low and rushed. The caller claimed to have seen her the night she disappeared, walking quickly down a side street a few blocks from her apartment, arguing with a man. The argument sounded intense, the caller said. Angry. The man grabbed her arm. She pulled away. Then they turned a corner and were gone. When the desk officer asked for a name, the line went dead. Detectives canvassed the area again, this time with renewed urgency. They found nothing that could be confirmed. No witnesses willing to go on record. No cameras that had captured the corner in question. The tip joined the growing pile of maybes, impossible to verify, impossible to ignore. Months later, another detail surfaced, almost by accident. While reviewing phone records again, a detective noticed something odd. A brief incoming call to her apartment line earlier that evening, around 7:45 p.m. before she left work. It lasted less than a minute. The number was blocked. No recording existed. Just a timestamp in silence. Who called her? What was said? Did it change her plans? There were no answers, only speculation that tightened like a knot around the timeline. The press picked up the story again briefly when the term cold case began to appear in whispers. A columnist wrote about unsolved disappearances, about how the city devoured its own. Her name appeared in print again, smaller this time, part of a pattern instead of a headline. The family hated that. Patterns made her feel interchangeable, like her life was just another data point. Years passed. Detectives rotated out. A new generation inherited the file, flipping through yellowing pages, shaking their heads at the lack of physical evidence. Advances in forensic science promised miracles, but there was nothing to test. No crime scene. No body. No DNA. The case existed mostly in ink and memory, both unreliable. Occasionally a lead would resurface, dragged up by a chance encounter or a guilty conscience. A former neighbor called once, claiming he remembered a van parked outside the building that night, engine running, lights off. He couldn't recall the color, or the license plate, or why he hadn't mentioned it sooner. The detectives listened anyway, wrote it down, and watched the lead collapse under its own weight. Her family never stopped asking questions. They wrote letters. They demanded meetings. They learned the names of every detective assigned to the case and memorized the way each one spoke when they had nothing new to say. They marked time not in years but in anniversaries, in birthdays that passed without her, in holidays where her absence was louder than any celebration. The city around her old apartment changed. Rents climbed. Tenants moved out. The building was renovated, repainted, stripped of the familiar details that once anchored memory. New residents slept in her old room without knowing whose shadow still clung to the walls. The past was being erased in real time. And still the case lingered. By the early 1990s, the official status was clear. Cold case. The words carried weight, a quiet finality that settled over the investigation like frost. It didn't mean no one cared. It meant no one knew where to look anymore. The trail had gone underground or vanished entirely, taking the truth with it. But cold cases have a way of waiting. They sit in the dark, patient, untouched until something shifts. Until a memory cracks. Until technology catches up. Until someone decides they can't live with what they know any longer. For now, all that existed was uncertainty, stretched thin over time. A young woman gone. A city that kept moving. And a question that refused to stop echoing, bouncing off concrete and steel, growing colder with every year that passed. Time did what it always does in cases like this. It blurred edges. It softened outrage. It taught people how to live with unanswered questions without screaming every day. By the 5th year, her name was no longer spoken with urgency inside the precinct. It was spoken carefully, like something fragile that might break if handled too roughly. The detectives who had worked the case from the beginning were gone now, replaced by men and women who knew her only through paperwork, through typed summaries and handwritten margins where frustration had leaked onto the page. One of them noticed something the others hadn't lingered on long enough. A pattern. Not in the evidence but in the omissions. The case file was thick but uneven. Dozens of interviews. Pages of timelines. And then gaps. Entire days undocumented. Leads mentioned once and never followed up. Notes that ended mid-thought, as if the person writing them had been pulled away and never returned. It wasn't negligence. It was volume. New York in the late 80s and early 90s buried its investigators under bodies and blood and noise. Subtle cases drowned quietly. The new detective started where everyone else eventually starts. With the last confirmed moment of certainty. 8:17 p.m. Metrocard swipe. Downtown station. Inbound platform. He stood there one evening after his shift, watching trains thunder in and out, imagining the press of bodies, the heat, the noise. In 1987 there were no turnstile cameras worth mentioning, no digital trail beyond a timestamp and a station code. She could have been alone. She could have been followed. She could have met someone there. The platform swallowed all possibilities equally. He followed the line she would have taken, station by station, noting exits, stairwells, blind corners. He realized something unsettling. There were at least 3 ways she could have left the system that night without ever being seen by anyone who would later remember her. The subway didn't just move people. It erased them. Back at the office, he revisited the witness statements from the building. The woman who thought she heard a scream. The neighbor who claimed to hear arguing. the superintendent who said nothing was out of place. None of them contradicted each other. They simply didn't align, like fragments from different nights, stitched together into a single narrative that might never have existed. Then there was the coworker sighting. The man in the dark coat. The detective pulled employment records, old schedules, visitor logs. He learned that in the weeks before her disappearance, the building across the street had been undergoing renovations. Contractors came and went. Temporary workers. Night shifts. Men in dark coats who had no reason to be remembered. If she had spoken to someone outside her office, he could have been anyone. Or no one at all. He found a note buried deep in the file, dated nearly a year after she vanished. A detective had written, almost as an afterthought, that her apartment key had been found inside on the kitchen table during a follow-up visit. That contradicted earlier reports stating her keys were missing. No explanation. No clarification. Just a line of ink and a question mark in the margin. If her keys were inside, how did she leave? If they were missing, how did they reappear? Someone had made a mistake. Or something had changed. The detective requested access to the original evidence storage. There wasn't much. A few photographs. Copies of reports. The answering machine long since wiped and reused, then discarded. No physical artifacts that could speak for her now. Just words. He called the family. They were wary at first. They had heard promises before. Fresh eyes. Renewed interest. Each one had ended the same way. But something in his tone cut through their practiced caution. He asked precise questions. He listened. He didn't rush to reassure them. They told him things that weren't in the file. They told him she had been planning a short trip out of the city the following weekend, something small, something she hadn't mentioned to coworkers yet. They told him she had been unusually distracted during their last phone call, as if she were listening for something in the background. They told him she had once mentioned receiving a call where no one spoke on the other end, just breathing. She had laughed about it then. Nervous laughter. The kind people used to make fear sound harmless. That detail chilled him. Anonymous calls. A blocked number. Silence. It fit too neatly with the unanswered call after she disappeared. The phone ringing into nothingness across the hall. Someone had been reaching for her. Or checking on her. Or confirming something. He ran the number patterns again, knowing it was a long shot. In the late 80s, records were paper, fragmented, incomplete. Still, he noticed something strange. The blocked call before she left work that night wasn't entirely invisible. There was a routing code, faint but legible, that pointed to a payphone bank near a bus terminal on the west side. Hundreds of calls passed through there every day. But it was a place. A physical location. Not a ghost. He went there. The terminal had changed, but the bones were the same. Concrete floors. Harsh lighting. A constant churn of arrivals and departures. In 1987, it would have been a magnet for transients. Drifters. Workers. People passing through without leaving names. If someone wanted to make a call that couldn't be traced, this was the place to do it. He talked to old employees. Most remembered nothing. One man, retired now, paused when he heard her name. Said it sounded familiar. Said there had been a woman reported missing around that time. Flyers taped near the restrooms. He couldn't remember seeing her, but he remembered the flyers being taken down quickly, as if someone didn't want them there. He had thought nothing of it then. The detective wrote it down. Another maybe. Another loose thread. Back at the precinct, skepticism met him at every turn. No body. No crime scene. No proof a crime had even occurred. Resources were thin. Priorities were loud. Cold cases didn't scream. They whispered. And whispers were easy to ignore. Still, he kept digging. He found an old incident report from a neighboring precinct. An attempted abduction, 2 months before her disappearance. A woman grabbed near a subway entrance late evening. She fought back. The attacker fled. Description vague. Dark coat. Male. The report had gone nowhere. No arrest. No follow-up. The detective circled it anyway, feeling the familiar frustration of patterns that almost formed but never fully closed. As the years crept forward, the case entered a strange limbo. Not active. Not forgotten. It existed in a gray space where only the stubborn stayed. The detective aged with the file. Promotions passed him by. He became known as the one who wouldn't let go. Then, nearly 15 years after she vanished, something shifted. A name surfaced during an unrelated investigation. A man questioned in connection with a different crime, a different woman, a different decade. His history was messy. Assault charges, stalking allegations, always circumstantial, always slipping through cracks. He had lived in Manhattan in the late 80s, near her neighborhood, near her subway line. The detective felt the familiar tightening in his chest. He had learned not to trust that feeling too much. Hope could be cruel. Still, he pulled the man's file, compared dates, addresses, patterns. There it was again. Dark coat, late nights, anonymous calls reported by more than one woman over the years. Never enough to stick. Never enough to hold him. The man denied knowing her. Denied everything. There was no evidence tying him directly to her disappearance. No witnesses willing to swear they'd seen them together. The case stalled again, this time with a new name written in pencil, tentative, erasable. Cold cases don't end cleanly. They fray. They stretch. They test the limits of memory and patience. This one had already outlived the life it stole, outlasted the city it was born into. And still, somewhere inside the tangle of half-remembered calls and shadowed platforms, the truth waited silent, watching, refusing to surface. Not yet. The name stayed in pencil for a long time. That alone said everything. Ink meant commitment. Ink meant certainty. Pencil meant fear of being wrong again. The man was ordinary in the way that made him dangerous to overlook. Mid-40s when the detective first pulled his file, thinning hair. A job history that drifted from one short-term position to another. Security work. Maintenance. Overnight shifts. Roles that put him close to people without making him visible. Roles that explained how he moved through buildings without raising suspicion. How he learned schedules, entrances, exits. Roles that taught him when no one was watching. In 1987, he had lived 6 blocks from her apartment. That fact alone was nothing. In Manhattan, 6 blocks might as well be the same building. But the detective couldn't ignore the way the addresses lined up, the way the subway stops overlapped, the way his employment record showed him clocking out near the bus terminal on nights that matched the pattern of anonymous calls reported by other women years later. Patterns again. Always patterns. Never proof. The detective requested permission to re-interview him. The request sat on a supervisor's desk for weeks. Cold cases were political. Every hour spent chasing a ghost was an hour not spent on something with a body, something with headlines. Eventually, the approval came back stamped and indifferent. The interview room was small, fluorescent lit, unforgiving. The man sat calmly, hands folded, posture relaxed. He smiled at the wrong moments. He answered questions with practiced ease, his voice even unbothered. When asked about 1987, he said it was a blur. Long time ago. Different life. He didn't remember her. Didn't remember her name. Didn't remember the building. Didn't remember the subway stops. Selective amnesia was common. Useful. Hard to disprove. When the detective mentioned the bus terminal payphones, something flickered. Just for a second. A tightening around the eyes. Then it was gone. The man shrugged. Everyone used those phones back then, he said. Cheap. Convenient. Nothing unusual about that. The interview ended with nothing concrete. No confession. No contradiction strong enough to lean on. The detective walked out feeling the familiar weight of failure settle onto his shoulders. But something had changed. After that interview, the man moved. Not far. Just far enough. Changed jobs. Changed routines. Small shifts, subtle but noticeable if you were watching closely. The detective was. He dug deeper into the man's past, reaching back before New York, before the city swallowed details whole. He found reports in other states. Harassment complaints. Women who said they'd been followed. Women who said someone called their apartments late at night and never spoke. Women who said police told them there wasn't enough to pursue. One report stood out. Dated 1991. A woman vanished briefly, then reappeared days later in another city. Confused, injured, unwilling to talk. She refused to press charges. The man had been questioned, then released. No evidence. No case. The report ended the same way they all did. Unsubstantiated. The detective felt the case tightening again, not toward resolution but toward obsession. He had to remind himself to slow down, to separate instinct from fact. Cold cases punished impatience. They demanded endurance. Years passed again. Technology crept forward. DNA databases expanded. Cold case units formed, then reformed, then lost funding. The detective retired before the case could break. On his last day, he boxed up personal notes he wasn't supposed to have kept, copies of reports, timelines scribbled by hand. He handed the official file to a younger detective and told her one thing: don't let the pencil marks fade. She didn't understand what he meant at first. Not fully, but she nodded anyway. The younger detective came at the case differently. She had grown up in a world where data lingered, where digital footprints replaced paper trails. She digitized everything, scanned reports, cross-referenced names, ran old addresses through new systems that could see patterns humans missed. That's when another anomaly surfaced. In the year following the disappearance, someone had accessed her credit report twice. Not her family, not law enforcement, someone else. The accesses were legal, masked through employment verification requests. One traced back to a security firm the man had worked for briefly in the early 90s. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't proof. But it was intimate. Someone had been checking on her, long after she was gone. The younger detective requested another interview. This time, the man's demeanor was different. Defensive. Irritated. He complained about harassment. About being dragged back into old nonsense. He threatened legal action. His calm had cracked just slightly. She asked him directly if he'd ever called her apartment. No. If he'd ever followed her. No. If he knew what happened to her. No. Each answer came too quickly. Rehearsed. Clean. When the interview ended, he stood too fast, chair scraping loudly against the floor. The sound lingered in the room after he left, sharp and ugly. The detective wrote a memo recommending closer scrutiny. Surveillance if possible. Financial review. Background expansion. The memo was acknowledged, then buried under more urgent work. Always more urgent work. The case cooled again, deeper this time. The family aged. Parents grew frail. Siblings carried the weight forward, becoming the keepers of memory, the ones who still answered calls from detectives who sounded younger every year. The city changed again. Towers rose where bus terminals once stood. Payphones vanished. The places that might have held answers were erased, replaced by glass and steel and progress. Then, more than 3 decades after she disappeared, the call finally came. Not to the detective. To the family. A voice on the other end said there had been a development. Significant. The kind of word that made hearts race and hands shake. The kind of word they had learned not to trust. They gathered in a quiet room at the precinct, faces lined with time and hope tempered by loss. Across the table, detectives spoke carefully, choosing words like explosives. New evidence had surfaced, they said. A connection previously unconfirmed. A witness who had come forward. Someone who knew something and had carried it for years. The family leaned in, breath held as the past began to shift again. The cold case stirring, not awake yet, but no longer entirely asleep. And somewhere, far from that room, a man who had lived comfortably inside the gaps of memory felt those gaps begin to close, the pencil marks darkening, threatening at last to become ink. The witness had waited 27 years to speak. That fact alone hung in the air like a confession before any words were said. 27 years of silence, of ordinary days built on top of a night that never let go. When the detectives finally sat across from her, they didn't rush. They had learned that time moved differently for people who carried secrets this long. You didn't pull. You let the truth edge forward on its own, cautious, brittle. She was older now, her voice roughened by years and cigarettes and regret. In 1987, she had been young, barely out of her teens, living in a cramped apartment 2 blocks from the missing woman's building. She worked nights. She came home late. She knew the streets when they were quieter, when the city showed its teeth. She said she remembered that night clearly. Too clearly. She had been walking home close to 9 p.m. when she noticed a man standing near the entrance of an apartment building, pacing, lighting one cigarette after another. She remembered him because he looked out of place, tense, scanning the sidewalk like he was waiting for someone who was already late. When the missing woman appeared, walking fast, head down, the man straightened. The witness slowed her pace without knowing why. She heard voices. Low at first. Then sharper. The woman sounded angry, the witness said. Not afraid yet. Just angry. The man grabbed her arm. The woman pulled back hard enough that her grocery bag ripped. Cans rolling across the sidewalk, clattering loudly. That was the sound the witness never forgot. Metal on concrete. Too loud. Too sudden. The witness froze. She told detectives she didn't know why she didn't intervene. Fear maybe. Instinct. The way the city teaches you not to look too closely. She told herself it was a domestic argument. She told herself someone else would step in. She told herself a lot of things. The man hissed something the witness couldn't hear. The woman stopped struggling. Not because she wanted to, but because he said something that changed everything. The witness saw it in her face. Recognition. Shock. The moment when anger turns into something colder. They moved toward the building entrance together, not walking side by side, not exactly forced but not free either. The door closed behind them. The street swallowed the noise. The witness waited. She said she stood there for nearly a full minute, staring at the door, heart racing, telling herself she should call someone, anyone. But no one screamed. No one ran. The city kept moving. A car passed. Someone laughed down the block. The moment slipped away. She went home. For years, she told herself she had imagined it. Or that nothing truly bad had happened. Or that the woman had simply gone upstairs to cool off and left later, alive, intact. Those stories helped her sleep. Then the flyers appeared. The face on the paper made her stomach drop. Same hair. Same coat. Same night. She tore one flyer down and stuffed it into her bag, hands shaking. She meant to call the number. She meant to tell the police what she'd seen. She didn't. She said the fear came back all at once. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being pulled into something violent. Fear of retaliation. Fear of the man's face, the way his eyes never stopped moving. So she stayed quiet. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into years. Silence hardened into habit. The detectives listened without interrupting. They had heard this kind of story before. The kind that didn't excuse itself, didn't ask for forgiveness, just laid itself bare. They asked her to describe the man. Dark coat. Average height. Thin. Nervous energy. She couldn't give a name. But when they showed her an old photo lineup, her finger hovered, trembled, then stopped. That one, she said. The man whose name had lived in pencil for decades. This time the reaction in the room was different. Not relief. Not triumph. Something heavier. Because a witness, even a late one, changed the shape of the case. Gave it edges. Direction. But it also raised questions no one wanted to ask too loudly. Why now? Why after all this time? The witness answered that without being prompted. She said she was sick. Not dying yet, but sick enough to start counting years instead of ignoring them. Sick enough to realize she couldn't carry this into whatever came next. The detectives moved fast. They re-examined every report involving the man, every complaint that had ever been dismissed, every woman whose voice had been minimized. They noticed how often he appeared on the periphery of violence without ever being centered in it. How often his name surfaced and slid away again. The witness's account didn't stand alone. It locked into a pattern that had been trying to form for decades. They brought him in again. This time he didn't smile. He sat rigid, jaw tight, eyes fixed on a point just above the detective's head. When they told him a witness had come forward, his lips pressed into a thin line. He said nothing. When they described the night, the groceries, the argument, the building entrance, his foot began to tap against the floor. Once. Twice. Too fast. They asked him if he had been near her building that night. No. If he knew her at all. No. If he had ever argued with her. No. Each denial sounded smaller than the last. Then they told him they knew about the credit report checks, the payphone routing, the prior complaints. The witness who had waited 27 years to speak. For the first time he looked directly at them. She's lying, he said. His voice cracked on the word. The interview ended without a confession, without an arrest. But the air had changed. The detectives felt it. The man felt it. The family felt it when they were told the witness had identified him. Hope surged again, dangerous and bright. But cold cases are cruel in their final acts. The more light you shine, the more shadows appear. The witness's delay weakened her credibility. Defense attorneys would tear it apart. No physical evidence tied the man to the building that night. No body had ever been found. The apartment showed no signs of violence. The city itself had erased half the possible corroboration. Still, prosecutors began to talk. Quietly, carefully, about what could be done. About what solved really meant when the truth arrived without a body to prove it. The family listened to these conversations with a kind of numb clarity. They had learned not to equate progress with peace. Knowing who might be responsible didn't give them back the years. It didn't answer where she was. It didn't tell them how it ended. But it did something else. It pulled the case out of the cold. And as investigators pushed deeper, as they pressed harder on a man who had survived for decades in the spaces between certainty, the question shifted from whether the truth would come out to whether anyone involved was ready for what it would finally say. The problem with truth when it arrives this late is that it doesn't come clean. It comes layered, compromised, stitched together from memory and inference and the quiet rot of time. By the time the case reached the prosecutor's office, it was no longer just an investigation. It was an argument about absence. About whether a life could be erased so thoroughly that proving its destruction became nearly impossible. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Thick folders slid across polished tables. Prosecutors asked the same questions again and again, not because they hadn't heard the answers, but because they needed to know which ones would survive in a courtroom. Where is the body? Where is the crime scene? Where is the moment you can point to and say this is where it happened? The detectives had none of those things. What they had was gravity, decades of converging behavior, a witness who had finally spoken, a man whose history bent consistently toward control and silence. It was circumstantial, yes, but it was not thin. They decided to push anyway. Search warrants were issued quietly, carefully, to avoid tipping him off. His current apartment was first. Small, immaculate, almost sterile. No photographs, no keepsakes, nothing that suggested roots. Investigators moved methodically, cataloging every drawer, every box, every forgotten corner. They found nothing connected to her. No clothing, no documents, no trophies, just the echo of a life designed to leave no trace. Next came storage units. Old rental records showed he had leased 2 over the years, both long since cleared out. One had been terminated abruptly in the early 1990s. The contents were gone. No record of where they went. Another absence. They moved outward, backward, chasing geography instead of objects. Old addresses. Former jobs. Places he had passed through and never stayed. Each location was a long shot, eroded by time, but each one carried the faint possibility that something had been missed. Then they found the car. It was a miracle, really, or something like one. A vehicle he had owned briefly in the late 80s, sold after her disappearance, then resold again, eventually abandoned and impounded years later in another state. By sheer bureaucratic accident, it had never been destroyed. It sat in a municipal lot, rusted, gutted, stripped of anything valuable. A shell. Forensic teams worked it anyway. They scraped what little remained. Fibers. Dust. The ghosts of materials that had survived decades of neglect. It was a desperate act, and everyone involved knew it. But desperation is the fuel of cold cases. Without it, nothing moves. The results came back inconclusive. No usable DNA. No definitive link. Another door closed. Inside the precinct, doubt crept in again. Detectives argued late into the night. Some believed they were chasing a narrative instead of evidence. Others believed the evidence had simply been buried too deep, too long ago, to ever surface intact. The younger detective listened to both sides, feeling the weight of every year that had passed before she ever touched the file. The family waited. They had learned the language by now. They could hear hesitation even when words were hopeful. They could tell when calls were coming because something mattered, and when they were coming because silence had become unbearable. This stretch was heavy with the second kind. Then the man made a mistake. It was small, almost invisible. He contacted a former coworker after learning. through an attorney, that prosecutors were reviewing his history again. The call lasted less than 5 minutes. But it was enough. He asked questions he shouldn't have known to ask. About witnesses. About timelines. About whether anyone had mentioned the building. The coworker felt uneasy enough to call police. That call cracked something open. Investigators pulled phone records again. This time with modern tools applied to old data. They reran analyses that hadn't been possible before. Mapping patterns instead of chasing single calls. And there it was. A cluster. A web of brief, blocked calls made over months, sometimes years apart, all routing through similar locations. Bus terminals. Transit hubs. Places designed to blur identity. Not just to her. To others. Women who had reported harassment. Women who had vanished briefly and returned changed. Women who had said someone was watching them and been told they were imagining things. The calls formed a constellation that pointed back to one man who understood how to exist without being seen. Still, none of it answered the central question. Where was she? The family asked that question again and again, not accusing, not demanding, just asking, as if repetition alone might make it real. Detectives had no answer. They had theories. They had maps. They had guesses that tightened their throats when they spoke them out loud. Bodies disappear in New York in ways that defy logic. Construction sites. Landfills. Water. Fire. Time itself. The city is an expert at erasure. Prosecutors reached a conclusion that felt both inevitable and hollow. They could not file homicide charges without remains. They could not guarantee a conviction with what they had. To move forward meant risking everything on a case that might collapse publicly, permanently. So they chose another path. They confronted the man again, this time not with questions but with pressure. They laid out the witness statement, the call patterns, the circumstantial net that had finally tightened around him. They told him what they believed happened step by step, leaving little room for denial. He listened in silence. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, almost bored. He said they were wasting their time. He said they would never find her. He said some things don't leave evidence. That was as close as he came to a confession. The interview ended with nothing signed, nothing recorded that could stand as proof. But everyone in the room felt it. The shift. The sense that the truth was no longer hiding by accident but by design. Outside, the city moved the way it always had, indifferent to the quiet war being waged inside its institutions. Trains ran. Crowds surged. Nights fell and lifted again. Somewhere within that endless motion, a woman lost in 1987 remained missing. Her story now heavy with near answers that refused to become final. And the closer the case crept toward resolution, the more it revealed its cruelest lesson. Some truths don't want to be found. They want to be endured. The city did not react when the case began to stir again. It never does. New York absorbs revelations the way asphalt absorbs rain, darkening briefly, then drying as if nothing touched it at all. Inside the precinct, though, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations lowered. Doors stayed closed longer. The file that had lived quietly on a shelf for decades now moved from desk to desk, heavy with implication. The younger detective stopped thinking of the case as unsolved. She thought of it as unfinished. She returned to the building where the witness said it had begun, standing across the street at the same hour, trying to hear what the night might have sounded like back then. Traffic was louder now, the sidewalk brighter. But the angles were the same. The entrance recessed just enough to swallow a person from view. The stairwell inside just narrow enough to trap sound. She imagined the grocery bag hitting the pavement, the sudden stillness after. She imagined how easy it would have been to mistake silence for safety. She went inside. The lobby had been renovated twice since 1987, but the bones remained. The stairs curved the same way. The basement door still opened with a reluctant groan. She stood there longer than necessary, aware of how thin the barrier was between imagination and memory, between reconstruction and fiction. Then she found something no one had documented properly. In the original photographs, the basement had been described as empty, unremarkable. But a maintenance log from the late 80s told a different story. For a brief period, less than 2 weeks after the disappearance, repairs had been conducted on a section of piping near the rear wall. Emergency work. Late night hours. Concrete poured to reinforce a damaged section of floor. The work order had been signed off quickly. Too quickly. No one had connected it to the case at the time. Or if they had, they hadn't written it down. The detective felt the slow, creeping chill of possibility. She knew better than to let hope surge unchecked. Buildings undergo repairs all the time. Pipes break. Floors crack. Cities patch themselves constantly. Still, she requested permission to look again. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in under the pretense of routine inspection. The building management complained. Residents were inconvenienced. The machine hummed and rolled across the basement floor, its screen flickering with abstract shapes and shadows. The technician frowned, adjusted settings, ran the scan again. There was an anomaly. Not a body. Not proof. Just a disturbance in the concrete inconsistent with the surrounding structure. Something had been filled in. Something old now sealed. The detective's pulse quickened, then steadied. She had learned how to control that response. Excavation required warrants, permissions, money, time. All the things cold cases were never granted easily. Prosecutors hesitated. Digging without certainty risked everything. A public failure would be devastating. Another empty hole in the ground would haunt the family and strengthen the defense's argument that investigators were grasping at ghosts. The family was informed anyway. They listened quietly, hands folded, eyes fixed on the detective's face. They did not ask if this meant she would be found. They asked if it meant she might be. The difference mattered. The detective chose her words with care. "It's a possibility," she said. Possibility was dangerous. But it was also oxygen. The man learned about the radar scan through his attorney. This time his reaction was not controlled. He called repeatedly. Left messages that grew shorter, sharper. He demanded to know what right they had to disturb private property. He accused them of harassment. He accused them of fabrication. His voice, recorded and preserved, carried an edge that hadn't been there before. Fear. Or anger. Sometimes they sound the same. The detective listened to the messages again and again. She noted the timing, the escalation, the way his tone shifted from dismissive to urgent. People who have nothing to hide do not usually panic over concrete. A judge granted limited permission. A small section only. No promises. No guarantees. The night before the excavation, the detective couldn't sleep. Not from excitement. From dread. Because she knew what finding nothing would do. How it would hollow out the case completely. How it might finally freeze it beyond recovery. Morning came gray and heavy. Workers cut into the basement floor with surgical precision. Dust filled the air. The sound echoed up through the building, intrusive, unsettling. Residents watched from a distance, arms crossed, curiosity battling discomfort. The family waited outside, unable to stand any closer. The hole was shallow. Too shallow. The anomaly turned out to be debris. Old pipes. Construction waste compacted into concrete decades earlier. No bones. No clothing. No trace of a human presence. The detective felt the disappointment hit like a physical blow. She kept her face still. Professional. Controlled. But inside something cracked. The family was told gently. Carefully. They nodded. They thanked everyone. They went home and closed their doors and absorbed another loss they had prepared for but never truly expected. Inside the precinct, the case teetered. Critics spoke up. Quietly at first. Then louder. Resources wasted. False hope. A narrative built on coincidence. The prosecutor's office pulled back again, retreating to safer ground. The word solved drifted further away, almost mocking in its distance. The younger detective considered stepping away. Not giving up. Just creating distance before obsession replaced judgment. Cold cases consumed people that way. She had seen it happen. Then another piece fell into place. A former associate of the man, now elderly, contacted police after seeing a brief news mention about renewed interest in the case. He didn't call himself a witness. He called himself tired. He said that years ago the man had talked too much one night. Drunk. Angry. Complaining about a woman who wouldn't let things go. A woman who had recognized him when she wasn't supposed to. The associate hadn't known what he meant at the time. He didn't want to know. He had laughed it off. Men said things, but the memory had stayed. When detectives asked why he was speaking now, the associate said he didn't want to die carrying someone else's secret. He said he wasn't sure if it mattered anymore. He said he was sorry. He couldn't give details. No locations. No timeline precise enough to stand alone. But his words aligned with the witness's account, with the phone calls, with the panic over concrete, with the pattern of a man whose control depended on silence. It still wasn't enough for charges, but it was enough to change the conversation. Inside the family's quiet home, photographs lined the walls. Her face at different ages, smiling, alive, frozen in moments before disappearance became her defining trait. They sat together and listened as detectives explained what this new statement meant and what it didn't. "It doesn't bring her back," one of them said softly. "No," the detective agreed. "But it brings us closer to the truth." Outside, night fell again over the city. Somewhere, the man sat alone, listening to the same city sounds he had learned to disappear into so long ago. For the first time in decades, those sounds no longer felt protective. They felt like witnesses. And witnesses, once awakened, are difficult to silence again. By the time the case reached its 35th year, it had become something else entirely. No longer just a missing person file. Not even just a cold case. It had transformed into a reckoning, slow and grinding, where certainty was no longer the goal. Accountability was. The prosecutor assigned to review it was careful, almost surgical in his approach. He did not talk about justice. He talked about thresholds. What could be proven? What could be argued? What could survive a defense built to dismantle memory itself? He knew the risks. A failed prosecution would not only free the man permanently, it would stain the case forever, turning suspicion into spectacle. So they changed strategy. Instead of asking how she died, they asked how he lived. They pulled financial records stretching back decades. Tax filings. Employment gaps. Short-term leases. Storage units that appeared and vanished. A life designed to stay light, mobile, untraceable. They compared it to known offenders with similar behavioral patterns. Men who stalked. Men who isolated. Men who erased. The resemblance was uncomfortable. They found more women. Not victims in the legal sense. Survivors. Women who had crossed his path and walked away unsettled, unable to explain why. Women who remembered his voice before they remembered his face. Women who remembered silence on the other end of a phone line. Breathing where words should have been. Many had never filed reports. Some had. None had been believed enough to matter. Until now. Statements were taken. Carefully. Patiently. No promises were made. Each woman was told the truth. That their stories might never see a courtroom. That they might only ever live inside a file. Still they spoke. And when their words were placed side by side, the shape that emerged was unmistakable. Control. Obsession. Disappearance. The man noticed. He withdrew further. Cut off what few social ties he had. Stopped answering calls. His attorney spoke for him now, issuing statements that dripped with indignation. This was harassment. This was persecution. This was law enforcement chasing headlines instead of facts. But the headlines never came. The case stayed quiet, almost invisible to the public. That was intentional. The last thing investigators wanted was pressure. Pressure made mistakes. Mistakes killed cases. Behind the scenes, they explored one final option. A declaration. In rare cases, prosecutors could move forward without remains, without a traditional crime scene, by formally declaring a missing person deceased, and naming a responsible party based on overwhelming circumstantial evidence. It was not a criminal conviction. It carried no sentence. But it carried weight. Legal weight. Moral weight. Said publicly, this is what we believe happened. It was controversial. It was fragile. And it would change everything. The family was brought in again. They sat in the same quiet room they had occupied so many times before. Chairs familiar. Air heavy with the past. The prosecutor explained the option slowly, choosing words that did not pretend this was a victory. If they moved forward, there would be no arrest, no trial, no handcuffs, but there would be a declaration, an official acknowledgement that she did not vanish by choice, that her life had been taken. that someone bore responsibility. The family listened. One of them asked the only question that mattered. Will it stop him from saying she just ran away? The prosecutor nodded. Yes. That answer settled something. They agreed. Paperwork moved through channels that had never carried her name before. Judges reviewed affidavits thick with decades of investigation, timelines, witness statements, behavioral analysis. The argument was not emotional. It was precise, cold. It treated her disappearance as a fact pattern, not a tragedy. The man was notified through his attorney. This time he did not call. He did not leave messages. He did not protest loudly. Silence returned, but it was different now. Not protective. Not strategic. Exposed. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was nearly empty. No cameras. No crowd. Just officials, attorneys, and a family seated together. Hands clasped, bracing for a conclusion that felt both long overdue and impossibly late. The judge spoke carefully. He acknowledged the absence of remains, the passage of time, the weaknesses inherent in memory. Then he spoke about patterns, about corroboration, about the improbability of coincidence stretched across decades. He spoke about how some crimes are designed to erase themselves, and how the law must sometimes respond not with certainty, but with reason. He declared her deceased. He named the man as the individual responsible for her disappearance. No gavel slammed. No gasp rippled through the room. The words landed softly, devastating in their restraint. For the family, something shifted. Not relief. Not peace. Something quieter. Recognition. The world, at last, aligned with what they had always known but never been able to prove. Outside the courthouse, the city went on, unaware that a missing woman from 1987 had finally been given a truth, even if it came without bones or blood or spectacle. The man left through a side door. No one stopped him. No one followed. Legally, he was still free. But the space he occupied had changed. He was no longer invisible. No longer a rumor. His name now lived in records that would not fade. In declarations that would outlast him. That night, the family gathered somewhere private. They spoke her name freely, without explanation. They told stories that did not end abruptly. They allowed themselves, for the first time, to imagine her final moments without wondering if they were wrong for doing so. The case was not closed. But it was no longer undefined. And for a cold case that had spent decades hiding inside uncertainty, that distinction meant everything. After the declaration, silence returned, but it was not the same silence that had haunted the case for decades. This one had weight, pressed down on everyone differently. For the family, it arrived as a strange calm, the kind that follows a storm you never believed would end. For investigators, it felt unfinished, like closing a book while knowing the final pages were still missing. And for the man who had been named, it settled like a shadow that no longer moved when he did. He tried to live as if nothing had changed. But something had. Neighbors noticed first. The way he watched the street now, not with quiet calculation but with irritation. The way he flinched when police cruisers slowed nearby, even when they kept going. His routines tightened. Predictable became rigid. The kind of rigidity that cracks under pressure. Civil consequences followed quietly. An employer terminated his contract after a background review flagged the court declaration. A landlord declined to renew his lease. Friends, few as they were, stopped calling. No one said why. No one had to. His name, once forgettable, now carried a story people didn't want to be adjacent to. He contacted his attorney repeatedly, demanding appeals, reversals, retractions. The attorney listened, then reminded him of the limits. This wasn't a conviction, but it also wasn't nothing. It would not simply go away. That knowledge gnawed at him. Meanwhile, investigators kept working, no longer constrained by the need to protect a fragile prosecution. The declaration had loosened something. Doors opened. People returned calls they had ignored before. Records that had been sealed were quietly reviewed again. The case breathed. One of those calls came from an unexpected place. A former transit employee, long retired, had read a small notice buried in a legal bulletin. Nothing public-facing, nothing sensational. Just a name, a year, a phrase that caught his attention. Cold case. New York, 1987. He stared at it longer than he meant to. He remembered a night shift decades earlier. A disturbance report logged but never escalated. A man arguing with a woman near a service corridor not open to the public. It hadn't seemed serious at the time. No injuries. No complaint filed. The couple had separated and disappeared into the crowd. The report had been archived and forgotten. The employee had forgotten it too. Until now. When detectives located the report, buried in a system that had been migrated and remigrated over the years, it felt unreal. The timestamp aligned. The location intersected with her subway route. The description of the man, vague but familiar, matched too closely to ignore. Still, it was not proof. But it was another echo. They went back to the man once more, not to interrogate but to observe. Surveillance, this time overt enough for him to notice. He complained. Loudly. Publicly. He told anyone who would listen that he was being harassed by a system that needed a villain. The more he spoke, the more details slipped through. Small inconsistencies. Shifts in language. A tendency to correct investigators on points they hadn't yet raised. One afternoon, during a routine conversation with a detective he had spoken to dozens of times before, he said something he couldn't take back. "She shouldn't have recognized me," he muttered. The room went still. The detective asked him to repeat that. He laughed quickly, too quickly, waving it off as frustration. A figure of speech. Taken out of context. But context was everything now. The phrase echoed against everything else. The witness's account. The associate's confession. The idea that recognition, not random violence, had triggered the end. The statement was documented. Signed. Logged. It still wasn't a confession. But it was a fracture. The family was told about it carefully, gently. They didn't celebrate. They didn't ask for more. They had learned the cost of leaning too hard on hope. Instead, they absorbed it quietly, adding it to the internal ledger they carried. One more line in a story that was finally beginning to make sense. Years earlier, they had asked where she was. Now they asked something else. Who was she to him? The answer was as chilling as it was simple. She wasn't chosen at random. She was noticed, remembered, marked. And when she recognized him, whether from a call, a glance, a shared space he thought was anonymous, control was threatened. And threatened control had always been the point where his restraint collapsed. Investigators documented this theory carefully, knowing it might never be tested in court. But theories mattered now. They shaped understanding. They replaced the chaos of not knowing with the structure of probability. The city remained unaware. People walked past the building every day without looking up. They rode the same subway line without knowing how close one life had come to vanishing completely unacknowledged. That anonymity no longer felt protective. Felt complicit. As the man's world continued to shrink, something else emerged. A rumor. Quiet. Unverified. That he had spoken again, this time not to police, but to someone he trusted enough to vent. Someone who didn't trust him enough to stay silent. Investigators waited. Cold cases teach patience like nothing else can. They teach you that pressure applied slowly is more effective than force. They teach you that people who survive on silence eventually forget how loud their words can be. And somewhere inside a man who had built his life around not being seen, the realization settled in. The story was no longer his to control. It was closing in on him, not with sirens or handcuffs, but with memory layered, cumulative, relentless. The kind that doesn't let go once it finally decides to speak. The call came in at 2:17 a.m. It wasn't anonymous. It wasn't dramatic. And it wasn't made to the police. It was made to a civil litigation office, one that specialized in post-declaration liability. The caller left no name. Only a message that lasted 12 seconds. 12 seconds that would shift the center of gravity of the case. I heard him say it. Years ago. I didn't understand what it meant then. I think I do now. By sunrise, the message was transcribed, duplicated, and forwarded carefully legally to the task force. They didn't rush. They never rushed anymore. The caller was located within 48 hours. A former coworker. Same building. Same floor. Different department. Back when people still smoked in stairwells and shared elevators without thinking twice about it. He had been young then. new, eager to stay invisible. And he had overheard something that didn't register as dangerous at the time. A conversation, half joking, half bitter. The man had complained about a woman who asked too many questions, who looked at him like she knew. He'd laughed it off afterward, said she'd scared herself and disappeared. People did that in the city, he'd said. Vanished. The coworker hadn't remembered it clearly until the declaration made headlines in legal circles. Until the dates lined up. Until the phrase cold case collided with a face he suddenly recognized from memory. When investigators interviewed him, he didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. He stuck to what he remembered, what he wasn't sure about, and what he regretted not questioning at the time. That restraint made his account heavier, not lighter. It wasn't hearsay. It was context, combined with the transit report, the documented slip during questioning, the associate's partial confession, the pattern that had taken decades to resolve itself into something coherent. Still, the legal wall remained. No body, no weapon, no direct forensic link. But something else had begun to change. Public records requests increased. Journalists, cautious but persistent, started connecting dots the city had long ignored. One article didn't name him directly, but it didn't need to. The description was enough. The timeline unmistakable. Neighbors started asking questions. Someone spray-painted a word on the sidewalk outside his building one night. It was washed away by morning, but the message lingered longer than the paint ever could. He stopped going out. Groceries were delivered. Mail piled up. Lights stayed on at odd hours, then off for days at a time. When he did appear, it was briefly, head down, shoulders tight. A man shrinking inside a city that had once hidden him perfectly. Investigators debated their next step. There was a path, risky, unprecedented but possible. A civil wrongful death action could compel discovery. Financial records. Personal correspondence. Storage units. Anything tied to the period surrounding her disappearance. It wouldn't require proving murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Only responsibility. The family was consulted. They took a day to respond. When they did, it was with a single sentence. We want the truth on record. The filing was prepared quietly. Filed without spectacle. Served without cameras. He received the notice on a Tuesday. Witnesses later said he stood in the lobby for nearly 10 minutes after reading it. Not moving. Not speaking. Just staring at the paper as if it might rearrange itself into something less final. That night he made another call. This one was to someone investigators already knew. Someone they had spoken to once before, years earlier, when the case had still been officially dormant. Back then, the person had denied knowing anything useful. Back then there had been no reason to push harder. Now there was. The call lasted 23 minutes. When detectives reviewed the phone metadata, they noticed something that hadn't been present before. He didn't hang up first. For a man who had controlled every exit, every narrative, every silence, it was a small thing. But cold cases are built on small things. On moments where control slips just enough for gravity to take over. By the end of the week, investigators were drafting a new internal memo. Not a conclusion. Not yet. But a shift in language. Where the file had once read suspected involvement, it now read something else. Probable responsibility, pending corroboration. It wasn't justice. But it was no longer denial. And somewhere, in the quiet space between night and morning, the man who had waited decades to be forgotten understood something he never had before. Cold cases don't stay cold forever. They just wait for the moment when silence becomes heavier than truth. The city never announced a resolution. There was no press conference, no podium lined with microphones, no official statement declaring the end of a nightmare. What happened instead unfolded in fragments, in filings and footnotes, in courtrooms without cameras and apartments where curtains stayed drawn. The civil case moved forward. Slowly, methodically, with the patience that only decades of silence can teach. Subpoenas were issued. Boxes were opened. Storage units long unpaid were finally cut loose. Inside them, investigators found nothing dramatic at first. Papers yellowed by time, obsolete electronics, clothing folded with the precision of someone who didn't like chaos. But patterns emerged. Receipts clustered around specific dates. Handwritten notes referencing meetings that never appeared on official calendars. A map of the city with certain streets circled, certain corners marked again and again, as if memorized through repetition. One item stopped everyone cold. A key. No label. No address. Old, worn smooth by use. The kind of key that belonged to a door that hadn't existed for years. It took time to place it. When they did, it led to a building demolished in the late 90s, cleared to make room for something brighter, newer, forgettable. Back then it had been a temporary structure. Offices upstairs. Storage below. A place people passed through without looking twice. Records showed he had access. No one else did. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in, more out of obligation than hope. The site had been paved over, rebuilt, layered with decades of progress. The scans showed disturbances consistent with old construction. Nothing definitive, nothing prosecutors could stand on. Still, the ground was marked. Because cold cases don't need certainty to leave scars. They just need enough weight to bend the truth toward daylight. The man's health declined. Neighbors noticed first. The delivery driver. The building superintendent. A once controlled presence reduced to brief, trembling appearances in the hallway. He missed appointments. Then deadlines. Then an entire deposition. When he finally appeared in court, it was through a video feed. He looked smaller than anyone remembered. His voice when he spoke was steady at first. Practiced. He denied killing her. He denied knowing what happened to her. But he admitted something else. That he'd been afraid. Afraid of what she'd discovered. Afraid of what she'd say. Afraid of the way she looked at him that last day. As if she were carrying a truth he could no longer outrun. Fear once spoken aloud changes shape. Stops being a shield. It becomes a confession's shadow. The judge didn't rule that day. Or the next. But the transcript told its own story. One that would be read and reread. And remembered long after verdicts faded from public memory. The family sat together in the gallery when it happened. No tears. No outbursts. Just hands clasped tightly enough to hurt. Eyes fixed forward. Absorbing every word like oxygen after years underwater. They never got remains. They never got a location. What they got instead was acknowledgement. A finding of responsibility. Not criminal. Not final. But permanent. The record would now say what the city never had the courage to write before. That her disappearance was not an accident, not a whim, not a choice. It was the result of another person's actions. Actions hidden by time, protected by silence, but no longer invisible. Outside the courthouse there were no crowds. Just a few reporters. A few locals who remembered her name. Someone placed flowers near the steps, though no one knew exactly why that spot had been chosen. Felt right. The man died 6 months later. Quietly. No obituary mentioned the case. No headline followed him into the ground. But the documents remained. The filings. The transcripts. The key locked in evidence, tagged and cataloged. A symbol of a door that would never be opened again. And the cold case file, once thick with uncertainty, was finally stamped. Not solved. But answered. In the neighborhood where she had last been seen, people still talk about her sometimes. Not in whispers anymore. In full sentences. In daylight. Her photo appears in articles now, not as a mystery, but as a person who mattered enough for the truth to survive longer than the lie. Cold cases don't end with closure. They end with recognition. With the understanding that time can delay justice, but it can't erase responsibility. That silence can stretch for decades, but it eventually fractures under the weight of its own lies. And somewhere in the city that never stops moving, a name once nearly forgotten has reclaimed its place in history, not as a question but as a warning. Because every cold case is a reminder. The past is never finished. It's only waiting for the moment when someone finally listens. Years pass differently after a cold case is answered. They don't rush anymore. They stretch. They linger. They carry weight. The city absorbs the ruling the way it absorbs everything else. Slowly, unevenly, without ceremony. Files are archived. Offices change hands. Desks are cleared. New cases arrive, loud and urgent, demanding attention. But somewhere deep in the municipal basement, a folder remains where it was placed, its spine stamped with a date that no longer feels distant, its pages worn thin by the simple fact that they were finally read. Her name begins to surface in unexpected places. A footnote in a law review article about civil accountability when criminal proof fails. A case study in a criminology class discussed not for what was found but for what was missing. A podcast episode that avoids dramatization and instead lets the silence speak. The pauses longer than the sentences, the gaps louder than the conclusions. People hear her story and recognize pieces of their own city in it. The hallway conversations that stop when someone approaches. The unspoken hierarchies. The men who control rooms without raising their voices. The women who notice too much, who ask questions that land like accusations simply because they exist. Cold case. The phrase stops being abstract. It becomes personal. The building where she worked no longer exists. It was replaced by glass and steel, by a lobby that smells like polished stone and expensive coffee. Thousands of people walk through it every day, unaware of what once stood beneath their feet, unaware that history doesn't disappear when walls are torn down. It just sinks lower, waits longer. Once a year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, her sister visits the block where she was last seen. There is nothing to mark it. No plaque. No candle. No official recognition. Just traffic. Footsteps. The city in motion. She stands there anyway. She imagines her sister stepping out of the building. Coat pulled tight. Mind busy with details that felt important in that moment. She imagines the glance over her shoulder. The instinct she couldn't explain. The sense that something was wrong without knowing why. She imagines the last ordinary second before everything changed. And then she lets the image go. Because imagining is no longer all she has. She has the record. The words entered into law that can't be erased by indifference. The acknowledgement that what happened was real. That it mattered. That it was not a story invented by grief or suspicion. That acknowledgement travels farther than any verdict. Detectives who work the case retire. Some of them carry it with them, not as a failure, but as a lesson. They tell younger officers about it over coffee, about the danger of dismissing instincts because evidence isn't ready yet, about the cost of waiting for certainty in a world that rewards speed. They talk about how silence protects the wrong people. They talk about how cold cases aren't dead. They're patient. Every so often, a tip line receives a call referencing the case. Not with new information. With recognition. I think I knew something once, a voice says. Or, I heard a story back then and didn't think it mattered. Or, I just want you to know I remember her. Those calls are logged. Because remembering is a form of evidence too. The family never stops missing her. That doesn't change. What changes is the shape of the absence. It becomes less sharp, less jagged. Still painful but no longer destabilizing. Grief settles into something quieter, something that allows for breathing. They speak her name freely now. They tell stories without lowering their voices. They laugh sometimes and then feel guilty, and then remember that laughter doesn't betray the dead. It honors the life that once made it possible. The man responsible fades from public consciousness, as he always wanted, but his control does not survive him. It can't, because his name, once carefully protected, now exists permanently beside hers in transcripts and rulings, linked by truth rather than secrecy. Anyone who looks closely enough will see it. Anyone who reads long enough will understand. Cold case. Not because it lacked answers, but because it waited for courage. In the end, there is no dramatic final image. No door slamming shut. No music swelling to signal resolution. There is only the city, continuing as it always does, layered with stories most people will never hear. And beneath those layers, a single thread has been pulled just enough to remind everyone of something they prefer to forget. That time doesn't absolve. That silence isn't neutral. That the truth doesn't need a body to exist. And that even decades later, even after the headlines fade and the files are boxed away, a cold case can still do what it was always meant to do. Can speak. And when it does, the echo lasts longer than the crime itself. There is a moment long after a cold case leaves the headlines, when it begins to exist in a different way. Not as news, not as procedure, but as atmosphere. It settles into the city like humidity, invisible, inescapable, felt more than seen. People who never knew her still carry the story without realizing it. They repeat the lesson in smaller ways, hesitating before dismissing a detail, pausing before ignoring a quiet concern, choosing to listen when something doesn't quite make sense. The case becomes shorthand among investigators, journalists, advocates. A reference point. A warning disguised as history. This is what happens when a truth survives longer than the lie built to bury it. Some nights, in apartments overlooking streets that have changed names and faces a dozen times since 1987, lights stay on late. People scroll through old articles, scanned court documents, yellowed clippings uploaded by strangers who refuse to let memory die. They read transcripts like scripture, parsing tone, timing what was said and what was carefully avoided. They notice things now that were missed before. A hesitation in a sentence. A contradiction buried 3 pages deep. A fear that leaks through the cracks of controlled language. Cold case. The words still carry weight. They always will. The family moves forward but never away. There is a difference. They don't seek closure anymore. Closure suggests a door. This case taught them doors can lie. What they have instead is grounding. A place to stand that doesn't shift when questioned. They visit each other more often now. They talk about ordinary things. Work. Weather. Small irritations. But sometimes, without planning it, her name enters the conversation and no one flinches. No one rushes past it. They let it stay, suspended in the room, present but no longer suffocating. That is what truth does. Doesn't heal. It stabilizes. In police training sessions, the case is mentioned quietly, not in bold letters, not as a triumph, as an example of what happens when certainty is demanded too early, when power is mistaken for credibility, when silence is confused with innocence. Young officers listen. Some of them take notes. Some of them don't realize they're being changed. Years from now, one of them will hesitate before closing a file. Another will push for one more interview, one more look at a detail everyone else has already dismissed. They won't remember why they feel uneasy, only that something once taught them to distrust easy endings. That is her legacy. Not resolution. Resistance. The city continues its performance of forgetting. New scandals replace old ones. New victims take up space where attention once lingered. The cycle remains intact. But beneath it, the current has shifted slightly, permanently, in a way that can't be reversed. Because a cold case that speaks rewrites the rules. Proves that time is not the same as distance. That years don't dilute responsibility. That power expires the moment it's exposed to light, even if that light arrives decades late. There are still unanswered questions. There always will be. Where exactly did it happen? How quickly fear turned into violence? What the final seconds sounded like? The city keeps those secrets. But secrets are not the same as victory. They are just leftovers. And they rot. Late at night, when traffic thins and the city exhales, there are corners where the air feels heavier. Not haunted. Not supernatural. Just dense with memory. Places where something irreversible occurred and time agreed to keep going anyway. If you stand there long enough, you don't hear voices. You hear absence. An absence once defined is no longer empty. That is the final transformation of a cold case. It stops asking to be solved. It asks to be remembered. Not because remembrance is kind, but because forgetting is dangerous. The file is closed now. Stamped. Cataloged. Filed where it belongs. But the case is not finished. It never will be. Because every cold case leaves behind more than questions. It leaves behind a responsibility. To listen harder, to doubt comfort, to understand that silence is rarely neutral and never harmless. Somewhere in the city, someone is noticing something right now. A detail that doesn't fit. A look that lingers too long. A story that changes just enough to matter. Whether that moment becomes another file, another delay, another decade of waiting, that depends on what happens next. Cold cases don't end. They hand the story forward. And the city, whether it admits it or not, is always listening. In the end, what remains is not the crime. It is the space it carved. A shape in the city that never fully closed. No matter how many years passed. No matter how many new buildings rose over old ground. The absence learned how to coexist with motion. How to slip between headlines and disappear from official memory. While staying alive in quieter places. in instincts, in unease, in the way certain questions still make rooms go silent. This is the afterlife of a cold case. Not resolution. Reverberation. The record says what it can say. It marks responsibility. It preserves truth in language precise enough to survive challenge. It does not claim certainty where certainty was stolen. It does not invent an ending to satisfy the living. It simply refuses to lie anymore. That refusal changes things. Changes how people listen, how they remember, how they doubt. Somewhere, a young investigator reads the case file late at night, long after it's required, long after it's relevant to any active assignment. They don't know why they keep reading. Only that something in the rhythm of it, the delays, the silences, the patience, feels important. They close the file differently than others did decades earlier. With hesitation. With respect. With the understanding that what looks finished on paper can still be alive in consequence. The family carries on. Not because the past loosened its grip, but because it finally stopped shifting beneath their feet. They learned that truth doesn't arrive like relief. It arrives like weight, heavy, real, impossible to ignore but stable enough to stand on. They live with that weight. And they survive it. The city keeps moving because that is what cities do. But somewhere in its machinery a correction has been made. Small. Nearly invisible. A recalibration that will never make the news but will quietly shape what happens next time someone disappears and the answer feels too convenient, too fast, too clean. That is how justice actually travels. Not in leaps. In pressure. Cold cases teach this better than anything else. They teach that time doesn't forgive. That silence isn't empty. That power depends on being believed and belief can expire. They teach that even without a body, even without a final location, even without a moment you can point to and say here, truth still has mass. It still bends outcomes. It still demands space. And once it's acknowledged, it cannot be unacknowledged. The story doesn't end with a name carved into stone. It ends with a city that knows it was wrong to look away. It ends with a warning etched into procedure, memory, and instinct. It ends with a cold case that refused to stay quiet long enough for everyone responsible to be gone. That is the real shock. Not that the truth emerged, but that it waited. Patient. Unmoving. Certain that eventually someone would listen. Because the past doesn't need closure. It needs witnesses. And once it has them, once the silence breaks and the weight shifts, the case stops belonging to the file. It belongs to everyone who heard it and understood what it was asking. To pay attention. To remember. To never mistake quiet for harmless again. That is where this story ends. Not in darkness. But in the uneasy light that follows, where answers don't erase the crime. But they do something just as important. They make forgetting impossible.